This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf Lamed Tes, the second to last daf of this fabulous Masechta, and the week of Shabbat Brachos continues. The Simcha continues. The learning the entire Chabura has been sponsored as a incredible schos for the new couple Yitzchak Gedalia and Tzipa Tavera, Mirz Hashem from Mishpachas Boleg should build an incredible bias them and be Israel, as well as Choshev Yisrachaim Devar Shemirim Bas Yitzchak Gidol Shan Ezra Bas Shanamakli Mordechai Bas Davajendo, as Gidol Bas Davajendo, as well as the schos for Shem Shal Yosef and your Vader Shalom and Yuta Men Vevega Chaim and Sarah Shalom. Those Zaydos are Vaskanai Lito Basim was Chaysa Yisrael Mendel as a person Shalei Shomas Naviv Shavik Shechano Shmo Ben Tildin Khan Rizim Chaim Basina Dinayna Bashin Mendes Viva Veger Vern Khalatson Zelu Rivgos Shava Naftali Si Ben Michal Esther Besoy Yishar Chali Yisrael. We're picking it up on the bottom of Lamed Ches Amid Beis. We're going to pick it up from 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says V'taima mai, and what is the reason? Which, let's just clarify one point, which at the end of this year I might have said a little bit confusing. We have a reason, we have an explanation to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if Reuven lends Shimon water and salt, and Shimon breaks the bread with that, the tchum goes by both of them. And we now have an explanation, Rav Abba's explanation. The explanation is that because it's dependent upon ownership, it's not going to be batal. It's not going to be batal, and therefore it makes a lot of sense. That which they asked in Eretz Yisrael, the great Gedalim were sitting and saying it should be batal. Rav Abba says no way, it's ownership. Ownership is not batal, and therefore the tchum will go by the ownership, and therefore we have one explanation. But now v'taima mai, and really we'll start off today with the Rashi. Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom, explains v'taima mai. Says Rashi that who's asking this question? It's Ashas Ba'ila. It's the Gemara asking the question, because the Gemara said we had a teretz, but now we want to know another way of learning up the Mishnah. So what is the reason that this dough goes by a joint tchum? Says the Gemara 3 terutzim. Abaya Amar teretz number 1, Gezir Shematasa Isha V'Shutfis. We're afraid of a different case. We make a gzira that maybe there will be a case that Reuven and Shimon will properly get together in a shutfis, in a joint ownership, and create a loaf of bread, and in that case, of course, the tchum will go by both. So in a case where one lends the other ingredients, we also say the tchum goes by both. Answer number 1. Rava Amar, Rava says the second reason, and now Rava is going to go and a bit more Yeredeya, a bit more, we're talking global of an answer. Again, answering the question, why isn't the water and the spices bottled? Says Rava, Tavlin letaima avida, such an important rule. Spice is there for taste. Vetaima loy bottle. Whenever we deal with the rules of bittul, we always have to remember, you cannot be mevatel something with taste. Something that gives a taste, something that gives a substantiability, that you feel it, you taste it. That can never be bottle. So says Rava, what did he borrow? He borrowed water, he borrowed spices. So in the bread you taste the other person, and therefore it's so understandable, says Rava, why the bread is a joint of tchum, because it can't be bottle. You know why it can't be bottle? Because tam is never bottle. And answer number 3 comes from Rav Ashi in the top of Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. Rav Ashi Amar Misham Davli Davar Sheish Lo Matirim V'Chol Davar Sheish Lo Matirim Filu Be'elef Lo Batal. Another incredible rule, really a complete circle back from about a month ago at the beginning of the Masechta, that anything which is Davar sheyesh lematirim, something that will be permitted tomorrow, will not be mevatel today. Meaning, what's the question? The question is on Shabbos, with regard to the tchum, we should say that the water and the spices are bottled, and therefore the tchum should go by my tchum, not by both of us together. Says the Gemara, but tomorrow it's not true, because tomorrow there's no tchum, it's Sunday. So Davar sheyesh lematirim, something that eventually will become mutter, will never be bottled. 3 different fundamental teretz, Rutim Abai, Rava, and Rav Ashi, in explaining the Mishnah, aside from the teretz of Rav Abba, why the loaf of bread, which was comprised of my flour, which I borrowed water and spices from a friend, the tchum will go by both of us. We continue in the Gemara, 3 lines to the top. Rav Yehuda Amar Paiter b'mayim. Rav Yehuda says the water is pater. Says the Gemara, Mayim in Melech Lai. Says the Gemara, only when it comes to water does Rav Yehuda argue and not by salt. The previous case for the Mishnah was water and salt. Rav Yehuda says water? No. What about salt? Says the Gemara, Vatan Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda is really the whole Havamina of yesterday. Rav Yehuda says it is bottle. What's bottle? Water and salt. Like Kasha says the Gemara, it depends what type of salt. Habemelch Saimis, Habemelch Astructnis. One is salt from Astructnin, which is larger salt, which is not bottle. One is Melech Sadaimis. Let's take a moment to see a very, very important Rashi. Rashi on the top of the Amid says Melech Sadaimis is Dakaim Aidu Bala. It's very small, so it's bottle. Now Rashi points out, how do I know that Melech Sadaimis is very small? He quotes a Gemara in Chulin that the reason we wash Mayim Achrayim, it's a chayva, because the Melech Sadaimis could blind one's eyes, God forbid, and you see it must be small. Why? Because if it was large and it was on your fingers, you're going to see it. If the whole concern that we're watching Mayim Achrayim is a bit of salt in your fingers that you might touch your eye and God forbid blind yourself, must be the salt is small. So very gishmak, when you finish the Gemara in Beitzah, we have a fascinating idea about Mayim Achrayim, the fact that it comes from this Melech Sadaimis, this salt which is not noticeable to the eye, and that is the reason why you have to wash Mayim Achrayim, and that is how we answer up the steer in Rabbi Yehuda. One is bottle, the small one is large, not the large one. Ask the Gemara, he said something different in a different Beitzah. He differentiated. What is a bottle in a dough, but not in a dish because of the sauce? Says the Gemara, when it's a thick dish, Rashi says a thick tavshel, then the right of the sauce is not nicker, and therefore it's like a dough, and therefore it will be bottle. But if the soft one, it will not. Again, different ways of reconcile the opinions of Rabbi Yehuda, whether the water, the salt, the spices will become bottle in the dough with regard to the halachos of tchum. And now we continue our fascinating discussion of these halachos of tchum with the new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Hagacheles Karagli Abailim, and hopefully a lot of these Gemaras should bring up memories of our Gemaras in Eruvin. Hagacheles, a coal is Karagli Abailim, goes by the owner. Vashaleves B'chol Makim. A flame has no tchum, it goes anywhere. Of course, the Gemara is going to discuss what exactly does that mean. Gacheles Shal Hekdish, Mayalim Ba. If I have a coal of Hekdish owned by the Beitzah Mikdash, there's a din me'ilah. What's a din me'ilah? We've learned many times that you're not allowed to use items of Hekdish, and if you do, it's deconsecrated. You're over in me'ilah, you're over in Aveira, and now loses its kedusha. V'shal heves loinanim v'loimailin. You're not allowed to use a flame, but there's no din me'ilah. The Gemara will explain. So this Mishnah we can really codify as the differentiation between coals and flames. The three different cases. The coals go by everyone, the coals go by the owner, the flames go by everyone. A coal of hektish you can't, there is mi'ila, the flame is no mi'ila. The coal, if you carry your chayiv, it's in its deraisa, the flame is not. So says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbani, continuing the theme, 5 things we said about a gacheles, about a coal. Number 1, hagacheles karaglei abaylim, like we saw in the Mishnah, v'shaleves v'chol makim. Number 2, like we saw in the Mishnah, gacheles shal hektish moilin by v'shaleves leinanim. And number 3, this is not in the Mishnah. You're not allowed to use a coal of avodah zara. V'shal heves, but if you have a flame of avodah zara, mutaris, you're allowed to use it. Number 4, if you carry out a coal, you're chayiv. This was the Mishnah of Shalev is Potter. And number 5, which is again not in the Mishnah, on the first white line, if you make a neder, you're not going to get any enjoyment or benefit from your friends. You're not allowed to use his coal. But you're able to use his flame, which obviously we're already starting to see the common denominator, the thread that weaves all these 5 things together. But now the Gemara asks that question: I don't understand. When it came to the shalheves of hektish, we had this middle ground. We said you can't use the flame. If you use the flame, there's no aveira me'ilah. When it came to avodah zara, we said you're allowed to use the flame. What's going on? Why don't we have the same 2 levels? You can't use it, and if you use it, it's not so bad. Explains the Gemara. Avodah zara de me'isa. It's disgusting. But you're never going to come to use avodah zara, so we're not so worried. So we'll let you use a flame of avodah zara. However, lo gazer bas no gzeira. Lo gazer rabbanan. Excuse me. Hektish the loy maz. Hektish is not maz. The opposite. It's kedusha. It's holy. Lo badal ishbina. You're not going to separate it. Gazer rabbanan. So rabbanan beta gzeira. They're nervous. If you start using flames on the Beitzah Mikdash, you're going to start to be using other items. So they made a gezerah from it, whereas by avodah zara you do not need that gezerah. Says the Gemara further on Moitzi Gacheles, on the 4th white line, there's just a Rabbi Mechayev Shaleves Potter. You take out the Coal, it's an issa daraisa, but the flame is not. Ask the Gemara about time going to the braysa. We have a braysa that says if you carry out a little bit of a flame, you're chayiv. And of course, within the discussion right now, we're going to figure out what does that mean. You're carrying out a flame. Let's let the Gemara elaborate. But we have a contradiction. Our Mishnah says you're potter for carrying out a flame, and the braysa says you're chayiv. Rav Sheshes, teretz number 1. The kisim. The Beitzah says the case that you are chayiv is you carried it out in a kisim with a splinter of wood. Says the Gemara, 1 second. So why are we saying you're chayiv because of the flame? You should be chayiv because of the piece of wood. Answers the Gemara, but the piece of wood is not the requisite shear, the requisite size to be chayiv a daraisa for carrying. We know there are different shirim, different sizes to be obligated a daraisa, and the kisim, the splinter, is not that size. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, you're only chayiv if you carry out a piece of wood that could cook a small egg, but this splinter is not, so you would not be chayiv on the splinter, but you'd be chayiv for carrying out the flame on the splinter. Whereas, of course, and that is how Rav Sheshes answers. Abai, and that's the case, where your chayiv is only if the flame is on a splinter. Now, what's the case where your potter of our Mishnah, the Gemara will get to in a moment. Abai says a different case that you're chayiv. Says Abai, you rubbed a utensil with oil and you lit it on fire. That's the case that you're chayiv in the Beitzah. Ask the Gemara the same question. You should be chayiv because of the utensil. You carried out a utensil. But it's a shard, so you're not chayiv on a shard. Why not? But the last Leishura, the same case that is not the requisite size. That's not, as we learned in the Mishnah, the size of a cheres of a shard is to put it between its fret to hold up a certain part of the window. That's going to be the size of your chayiv, and it's not that size. So says the Gemara, those are the cases that you're chayiv, either that you're carrying a flaming shard or you're carrying a flaming toothpick, a piece of twig, splinter. It's the case. He told us all the case you're chayiv. So what's our Mishnah talking about? In what case you're potter? Going to Adi Adu Rishus Rabim, where the flames literally jump into Rishus Rabim. What that means is you fanned the flame with your hand and the flame flew out into Rishus Rabim. In that case, it's not called you carried in Rishus Rabim, and in that case, you would be potter. And those are the discussion between the flame and the coal. The coal is more obviously substantial, it's more of a chiyuv. The flame is not. And within there, we learned the difference between a flame of kedusha, which we're afraid you're going to come to get closer, so we say it's asur lechatchila, but there's no din me'ila, whereas by avodah zara, it is not even that. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Lametes and Aleph. Bar, continuing the discussion of Zcham. Bar shall yachid keragle yachid. If you have your own well, the water in the well goes by the owner of the well. Shall anshe yoseyir. If there's a well of the whole city, keragle anshe yoseyir, anyone in that city. Shall ole Bavel. If you have a well of people who are going up to Bavel, like we've seen in many Gemaras, those pasei birayis, they made these special ways that when people would go up, they'd have wells to be able to drink from. Keragle hamimali. Anyone that fills it up, it goes by his tchum. Says the Gemara. So we have 3 different types of cases in our Mishnah. We have a singular well, we have a city well, and we have Oile Bavel well. Says the Gemara, Ramili Rav Nachman Rava asks a contradiction to Rav Nachman. Tanan, it says in our Mishnah, the well of a person goes by his feet. For a minute, we'll ask you a contradiction. If I have running water, running streams, it doesn't go by any one person, it goes by every person. What's the difference? Difference being, if I draw a cup of water from a stream that's running over, or a spring that's running, I draw that water and I give it to you, the tchum continues. It's any person, whoever has it, it's his tchum. Whereas in the Mishnah, when it said that the bar of the yachid is the feet of the yachid, then it goes by that person, and if you give it to someone else, it's still the original person's. So says the Gemara, what's the difference? Amar Rava explains, our Mishnah is not about running water, it's not moving water, it's still water, it's contained in one area. It's contained in one area, and that is the reason it is collected. That is the reason why the tchum goes by either the yachid of the city, etc. We continue that the last case of the Mishnah said a well for all the people going up from Bavel. The well goes by the well goes by the person who fills it up. Itmar, we learn 3 lines in the bottom. Mila v'nas in the chavero. Let's say I filled up a cup of water and I give it to my friend. Rav Nachman Amar karagli mishan ismali loy. It goes for the one I gave it to. For Rav Sheshes Amar karagli hamimali, the one who filled it up. So fundamental machlokes, I fill up a cup, I give it to you. Is it your feet still tchum or my feet? Rav Nachman says your. Rav Sheshes says mine. But my komifkli, what is this machlokes? Mar savar bir defkeru, mar savar bir deshutfehu. Machlokes, what is the status of a well? And let's let Rashi in his eloquent nature speak it out. Rashi, 4 lines in the bottom. Rav Sheshes savar bir defkeru, says Rashi. Really, when I pick up something for you, you don't make a kinyan. And Rashi quotes the Raya. For Rav Nachman savar. Rav Nachman Savar, really it goes, the well is owned collectively by everyone. Lo yifkaru b'nei hagel, it's not Hefker. Elanasnu l'chol Yisrael, the entirety of Klal Yisrael owns this well. Everyone going up from Babel. Sheishutfin by the all partners in it. When I tell you, fill me up a cup of water, and it goes in his messenger, it's not that I'm picking it up for you, and that is the reason why Rav Nachman says it goes by Ragli Mishan is Malay, because we're all owners. If I ask you to do it, you're being my shliach, but it goes by my feet. Says Rashi says, no, we're not all owners. It's Hefker. It's Hefker, and what's the din with Hefker? That the first person that picks it up, it becomes his. So that's the machlokes. Do we view a well as Hefker, ownerless? Therefore, the first person that picks it up, even though I intend for you, but the mere fact I picked it up, says Rav Sheshes, it becomes like my feet. Says Rav Nachman, no, the well is owned by the entirety of Klal Yisrael. So when I pick it up for you, I'm doing it for you, and it goes by your feet. Eisvei, Rava le Rav Nachman. So Rava asks Rav Nachman again. Rav Nachman being the opinion that the well is owned by everyone by Shutfim. Ask Rava, Harini alecha chirem. If someone says, I am unto you chirem, I'm not allowed to get enough from you. Harini alecha chirem. Yeah, I'm a chayrim to you. Hamudar aser. The one against who the neder is made is not allowed to have benefit from the one that said the neder. Case number 1. Case number 2, turning over to Lametesam piece. Hare ata alai chayrim. If you are chayrim to me, then hanoider aser. Not the nudar, but the noider is aser. When they made the neder is aser from having benefit from the other one. Hareini alecha. But if someone says, I am to you, va'ata alai, and you are to me, shneim they're both answer to each other. Okay, so far so good. But they're allowed to get benefit for those going up to Bavel. But they're not allowed to get benefit from those in that city. What is considered Oile Bavel, an item of those going up to Bavel? And of course, this is where the question is going to come from. And the well that's in the middle of the city. The streets are basic. So we have within this Mishnah Nadarim defining different words of a neder. I'm also to you, you're also to me, we're both also to each other, and we have to figure out where do we each have ownership in. I have ownership in my city, you have ownership in this, we both have ownership in that. Within that it said Shal Oili Bavel, and included in the Oili Bavel was what? Was this well. Vi Amri, now the Gemara explains what the question is, 6 lines down. Vi Amri, Bir de Shutfiyu, according to Rav Nachman, what happened? We said that the well is owned by Shutfim. It's not owned by the entirety of Klal Yisrael, but rather the well, excuse me, I said that wrong. It is owned by the entirety of Klal Yisrael. It's not Hefker. One more time. Rav Nachman argued and said the well is not ownerless. That's Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman holds the well is owner-owned. Who owns it? All of Klal Yisrael. We're all Shutfim. Says the Gemara. But if you hold beer the Shutfim, am I mutter? So why let it get enough from it? When I make an us, I can't get benefit from you. You can't make. And you cannot get benefit from me. We each have one dot ownership in this well, so we both should not be allowed to use the well. So why did the Beitzah say umutarim in Oili Bavel in the well? Clearly, we see Rav Nachman does not hold that the well is owned by everyone. Vatanan hashotvin shenadru anazem mizaf. They made a neder one from another. You can't come into the courtyard to bathe. Vibar lirchaitz. You can't go into the well to bathe. So says the Gemara, what's going on? A well should be something, if it's jointly owned, you're not allowed to get benefit from each other. If I make a neder from you and you make a neder from me, you can't come into my well. You similarly should not be able to use the well of Eile Bavel, because the well of Eile Bavel is owned by everyone, and we're part of everyone. Clearly, Rav Nachman does not hold that the well is owned by everyone. Rather, Rav Nachman must hold the well is hefker. So ask the Gemara, we have a stira in Rav Nachman. We said a moment ago on the bottom of Amud Aleph, the Rav Nachman holds the wells and owned by Shotfim, it's owned by the entirety of Klal Yisrael. But the Gemara just proved that it can't be. It must be that the well is hefker, because if the well was owned by everyone in Klal Yisrael, then when I make a neder one from another, we should not be allowed to use the well of those going up from Bavel. Answers the Gemara, Hacha Nami is a little bit of a girsa over here. Either you say Lirchitz Bebarach Hanami, or you say Hacha B'Mayaskinan. What are we talking about? Lemalois. Mar mididei kamamale, mar mididei kamamale. What was the proof? The proof was, we quoted a Beitzah, that you can't bathe in the other person's well. That's true. I can't bathe in your well because that's called getting benefit from you. But when it comes to fill up a cup of water, that you're allowed to do. Because when I fill up the cup, we view it as if I'm filling up from my portion. When you fill up a cup, it's from your portion. So it's true, Rav Nachman could hold that we're each owners. We each have a portion in this well. Yet, and I make a neder from you, and you make a neder from me, we're still allowed to use the well. Why? Because when we fill it up, our cups, each one is filling up from their own cup. But says the Gemara, 1 second, this should ring a bell from yesterday. The only way that could work, that each one is viewed as if you're filling up from your own well, is if it's breira. We retroactively clarify, and this was the example we gave yesterday, that when I draw the cup, I retroactively, that was my cup all along, and I'm not taking from your possession. Does Rav Nachman subscribe to that? But we learned in the Mishnah and Shkalim that we learned a few months ago. A bit of a complicated discussion. To make a long story short, everyone in Klal Yisrael gives a shekel. But not only do you give a shekel, you have to add on a kalboin. You have to add on a little bit. Why do you have to add on a little bit? Because within the usage of the shkalim, sometimes someone would give a larger shekel and they would have to exchange it. And within the money changer, there would be a bit of a loss to the hektish, to the Beis HaMikdash. So we would compensate by adding on a kalboin. Halacha number 1. Halacha number 2 is shutfim, partners do not give meiser behema. So the question is, what do we view an estate? Similar to the discussion we had yesterday, we have an estate that 2 brothers inherit from the estate. Do we view those 2 brothers as if they are like the father? And if they're like the father, they're not called partners. They're like one entity called the father, and then they would have to give meiser behemer because they're not partners. And similarly, the halacha is, if a father gives 2 half shekels for his 2 children, he does not have to add on a kalboin. That's one way to do it. Or do we say no, that the children are like shutfim, they're partners, and if they're partners, then the halacha is they're pater from meiser sheni, but they have to add on this kalboin, because the halacha is when 2 people together give 1 shekel to the Beis HaMikdash, they have to add on this little bit, so therefore when you change that 1 shekel into 2 half shekels, hektish doesn't lose. Says the Gemara of Amar Rav Anan, and Rav Anan explained, the whole discussion is only if when the brothers split it up, they split up like with not like. One person took 1 item, gedim, goat, and one took sheep, etc., etc. Let's say each one split up every item equally. They split up the sheep 50-50 and the goat 50-50. Everything was split up equally. Says Rav Anan, then there's no problem. They're not shutfim. They're not partners. Then this is retroactively clarified. It was yours all along. You're just like the father. That is Rav Anan. For Rav Nachman, and this is what we need right now, Rav Nachman Amar, no. We do not say that, because Rav Nachman says we don't hold up breira. So even if we split up each item 50-50, it's not viewed retroactively as if we're in the place of our father and we each took back from the estate. No way. Says Rav Nachman, we'll always consider shutfin the brothers, and obviously the ramifications in shkalim is going to be you have to add on your kalbain, and you're going to be potter from meiser behema. But what do we see? Rav Nachman does not subscribe to breira. So back to our question, what is going on over here? When one makes a neder enough from each other, how can we say that Rav Nachman is of the opinion that the well is going to be Shotfim, the well of Oilei Bavel. We started off today, the bottom of the Amud with Machlokes from Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says it's Hefker. Rav Nachman says it's owned by everyone in Shotfim. And the Gemara answered no problem, because each one they fill up their cup. Lebreira, retroactively, we clarify it's your cup. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. Rav Nachman does not subscribe to that din. Ella, and we conclude with these words, the Kulei Alma Bir de Hefkeru, everyone holds that the well is Hefker. Ella Hacha b'magbia metzila chavera kamif. What is the machlokes back from the bottom of an aleph when it comes to filling up from this well? The machlokes is not whether the well is hefker. The machlokes is magbia mitzila chavera. Can you pick up an item for your friend? While we conclude, let's just look at one Rashi. Rashi magbia mitzila chavera. Kamifliki says Rashi, second white line, that we're not talking about the machlokes whether magbia mitzila kana chavera kamifliki. We don't have that girsa. Rather, because then it's a kasha, says Rashi, it's not the case. Rather, what's going on over here? What's going on is we're 5 lines into Rashi. The machlokes is, can I pick up something for you? Upirish. Everyone holds the law. When I pick it up, I'm not kind of for you. Ella im kana magbia, unless he's kind of himself. Im loy kana pligi. The machlokes is, when I pick it up, am I kind of? Rav Nachman savar loy kana amagbia. When I pick it up, I'm not kind of. You know why? I don't have das to pick it up for myself. Ella misha nismala loy kanam. The other guy, and that goes back to the machlokes that we started off, is when you fill up something for someone else, whose tchum does it go like? Says Rav Nachman, it goes like the other person's, because when you picked it up, you did not have any das to be kind it. And when I give it to my friend, he has das to be kind it. And therefore, when he takes it, he is kind, and therefore the tchum goes by his feet, and he makes the kinyan. That is the opinion of Rav Nachman. And let's just conclude that Rav Sheshes Savar, 3 lines from the bottom in Rashi, says, Kana hamagbiyah tchila. When I pick it up, automatically I make a kinyan. And therefore, whose tchum does go like the ragli of the memale, me, the one that picked it up, and then I give it to you, but its tchum will always go by mine. And that is how the Gemara concludes an explanation. The machlokes from Nachman and Rav Sheshes is whether magbiyah metzila chaveroi, whether I myself am kinda, says Rav Sheshes, yes, or says Rav Nachman, you are not kinda. When you give it to your friend, he makes the kinyan, and therefore the tchum goes by his feet. Tomorrow, Mir Tashem, we'll pick up from the Mishnah, and we'll finish the Masechta together.